We're here today because there really is a crisis in higher education. And anybody that's trying to get a higher education knows it. Now, maybe there's some people that are out of touch about the reality of the situation, but any student that's trying to make it, any set of parents, like my wife and I, who will have 2 of our 4 kids in college, we have a senior, and then we're going to have a freshman in college this fall. These are decisions that we or factors that we have to have in discussions that we have around our kitchen table, and there's a lot of people that are. And let's just talk a little bit about why it matters in the first place, because some people say, well, a college education is fine, but why is it important? Let me tell you why it's important. Let's just talk about, for a second, the economic effects of getting a higher education in the first place. If you have less than a high school diploma, your median weekly earning is likely to be about $472. If you get your high school degree, the median income weekly earning for 2013 was $651. If you get some college, not a complete degree, but some college, it goes up to $727. If you actually get your associate's degree, it's $777. If you get your bachelor's degree, it's $1,108, and if you get a master's degree, it's $1,329. Look, the case is real clear. This isn't something that's frivolous. It's an economic necessity. If you come out of high school and you don't have anything, any further education, you're going to be in trouble economically. So this is something that's an absolute necessity for people in Ohio. Now, how is Ohio doing now? Since we know that it's so necessary to get education past high school, how are we doing right now? Well, there was a study that came out actually earlier this year where Ohio received actually 4 or more F grades from a national association on 5 possible methodologies. That includes affordability. Well, let's talk about a little bit what's happening since the recession hit. Who's been hit the hardest? Those that don't have either an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. They're the ones who are suffering the most in this economy. Now, what's happened in Ohio in the last 10 years? We've been going backwards when it comes to the affordability of college. We're at a time where it's more and more necessary. We're actually heading backwards. Right now, the average tuition and fees at a 4-year public college in Ohio are 6.2% higher than the national average, and for community colleges, they're 21% higher. Now, let's talk about those higher fees, what has it meant for some of the people here behind me and some of the students and their families? What has it meant? Well, in the United States of America, Ohio has the 6th highest share of graduates leaving with debt, and the 9th highest average debt amount. We're talking about in 2012, 69% of Ohio's 4-year students were leaving with debt, and the average debt was about $29,000. Now, you go back 21, 22 years ago, Ohio was paying about $7 for every $1,000 that we were spending on education was funding higher education. We were 39th in the country at that time. Now we're 41st in the country. These are policy decisions that we just can't afford. They're having real economic impacts on our residents, and it's getting worse. Why is it getting worse? Well, because in his first budget, Governor Kasich took a bad situation, he made it even worse. There were over $200 million in cuts, and so we're really at a crisis proportion. So let's talk about what can be done about it, and the plan that we're talking about here today is focusing really on 3 distinct policy areas. First of all, we have to focus on saving for college at an early age. That's critical for a number of reasons. Our goal is real simple. We want Ohio to become the first state in the country where every single child, when they start kindergarten, has a college or educational savings account set up for them and held in trust for them until they graduate from high school. There's not a state in the country that does it, but we could be the first state in the country to do that, and we should do it. Now, for anyone who believes that that is an unrealistic goal, I just have to say that They're wrong because my county became the first county in the United States to have a universal college savings account for every single child that starts kindergarten. We started it this year. And if we can do it in our county, we can do it, I think, for an affordable amount of money. We can do it statewide. Now, what does that do? Well, it does two things. Number one is it starts to put a down payment on educational costs. Whether it's a four-year degree, for a four-year degree, a four-year institution, a community college, or for vocational education. But what it does is it sends this very powerful message that there has to be an educational strategy past high school. And what it does really kind of on a psychological level for the student, for the child, is it says you have a future past high school. You have great potential. You have unlimited potential. And to send that message to a child when they're 5 and 6 years old is one of the most powerful things that we can do. We know that it works on a local level, and we should do it at the statewide level. So the first part of our plan that we're announcing today is to make that completely statewide. Now, we have what's called a 529 program and plan, which allows families in Ohio to save money and tax-free. But here's the problem. It's not universal. It's not even close to being universal. It's only about 10%, if that, of families in Ohio are able to put money into a 529 plan. And the overwhelming number of them are actually not either working people or the working poor or middle-class families. Most of them are actually upper income. And so we're not really reaching the population that we need to reach. So first and foremost, we're going to look at having that done on a universal basis. Secondly, we've got to talk about what we can do when it comes to the loan debt that's out there right now. Let me give you some statistics, and these statistics, in my opinion, are just absolutely startling. In the 2013 to 2014 school year, Ohio residents have 742,000 outstanding student loans. $3.75 billion in the federal student loan program. This is an enormous drag on our economy. If you talk to any of the folks that are dealing with these debts and these loans, what it means is the money that should be going into our local economy, that should be supporting their families, is going right out of our community. And there hasn't been any kind of strategic effort from this governor to try to get a policy in place to try to refinance these loans. He hasn't been working with our federal partners, our state partners, with our financial institutions. It's not happening. They don't realize what a big deal this is, what a financial crisis it is for all of those families. And we've got to take action when it comes to that. If you can refinance a business loan, if you can refinance a home loan, you ought to be able to refinance your student loans to reasonable rates that people can still support their family and still repay. We're not doing that in Ohio, and we need to. So that's the second part. What's driving all this? What's driving all of this debt? By the way, the number, it's incredible. The number of students that are now having to try to support themselves through school by getting loans has been spiking incredibly, particularly, by the way, with community colleges. It used to be that community colleges were so affordable that students didn't necessarily need a lot of loans to get through a community college. That's not the case anymore. If you look at the part of the student population where the number of students that are getting loans has increased the fastest, it's those that are going to community college. So we've got to recognize that. But one of the things that's happened in the last few years is the state program, which is called OCOG, OCOG, which was really the only program that's providing need-based financial aid, has been absolutely slashed. So you're talking about serious cuts. Funding for that has gone down dramatically, and that's one reason why tuition is going up as well at the same time. We've already had 6 public universities that have announced or have already approved tuition hikes, and we expect there, unfortunately, to be more. So let's talk just a little bit about what this looks like in terms of increasing financial aid. We're giving less money than we were in terms of real dollars than we were a decade ago. So it's not just that it's not keeping up with inflation or keeping up with the number of students. We're literally not even giving out as much money as we used to. The amount of money that we're giving in need-based financial aid is $150 million less this year than it was back in 2007 and 2008. So when it comes to funding priorities, we have to make this a top priority. We have to resolve as a state and as a community to say that when we have extra money, instead of pouring those resources into tax cuts that overwhelmingly benefit the wealthiest people in the state, we've got to make an investment when it counts. And that's in the students in this state. So one of the things that we're proposing is that the grants, the maximum amount of grants should be increased and the funding levels should be restored. There's ways to do that that would actually enable students to end up drawing down more money from Pell Grants, which right now, because of some of the restrictions, they actually cannot draw down as much Pell Grant dollars as they could before. Lastly, I just want to mention that we really recognize that vocational education is an absolute essential element to educational success. No question about it. And there's lots of things we can do. First of all, being supportive of our community college, being supportive of our technical training, certainly that's part of it, but it's also, and this is one thing that I do agree with some of the things the governor said about supporting that at a high school level, but we've got to make sure that when kids are in high school, they can start that path, they can get as much early college credit as possible. That will also help with the affordability. So, this is what we've got to do in Ohio. Number one, we've got to recognize that it's a crisis. We've got to recognize that we're one of the worst states in the country in terms of investing in our children's higher education. That is just a fact. And we've been neglecting that actually before Governor Kasich took office, but it has accelerated. And there are several different approaches. Number one is helping kids save early and getting them focused on higher education in the first place. Secondly, dealing with the tremendous amount of student loan debt that's out there right now. And then thirdly, recognizing that a lot of the scope of that problem exists because we're not giving the money in financial aid that we were even a few years ago. And if somebody is going to say, well, we had to make those sacrifices, then when the economy started to recover as it did nationwide, why didn't we restore that funding? Why was the number one priority to give tax cuts to the wealthiest people in the state? This is an economic theory that by disinvesting in higher education, it doesn't work. It's never worked. Look at the unemployment rates for those that have college degrees or at least 2-year degrees or technical certificates versus those that don't. If you're wondering why we've got such lackluster job growth in this state, that's the reason for it. So we know what works, and we know that Ohio, which at some points in our history was leading the country in terms of access to higher education, has fallen behind. And we're only one election away from really heading into a completely different direction. Not just because it's good for the students, but because it's good for everybody, because it's going to create a more vibrant economy. The jobs of the 21st century are going to be filled by people that have training past high school. If a kid gets out of high school, whether they graduate or whether they drop out, and there's nothing else on their horizon for them educationally, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to be stuck in poverty or a low-wage job. And the good news is that the kids in Ohio want this. They want this opportunity, but they're sitting around the kitchen table trying to figure out how in the world are we going to make it? And how many tens of thousands of dollars of debt are we going to be stuck with, or are our parents going to be stuck with? And we shouldn't be facing that situation. I don't want families, as I said, my wife and I, we're doing fairly well financially and we're able to make it. But how many families this year, right now, because college acceptance letters have been sent out, people are deciding where they're going to go. How many families said, do we have to take out a second mortgage? Do we have to decide which child we can afford to send to school? Do we have to decide if we're going to work a second job or a third job at lousy wages so that our child can have the same educational opportunities that we have? And we're not asking for the states to do everything. That's why we have a real emphasis on saving for college as well. So we certainly agree that people should have to make sacrifices to go to school, but they are making those sacrifices. It's the state government, and it's John Kasich that's been walking away from that commitment. And we're one election away from turning direction on that. So I want to thank everybody for coming out here. We will take questions.
Actually, before we head to questions, we have 2 other speakers.
We do.
Personally experienced this issue. So Eric, you want to go on up?
Come on up. Yes, sir.
Thank you everyone for coming out. My name is Eric Rosso and I'm the political liaison at SEIU District 1199. But today I'm here as a recent graduate of the Ohio Public University school system. I attended both undergrad and grad school here in Ohio, first at the University of Akron, then at the Ohio State University. To pursue both my academic and professional goals, I needed to take out student loans to finance my education. That monthly payment now is just shy of $500 a month. And after a year and a half of being in debt repayments, I still owe $54,000 in total student loan debt. My situation is hardly unique to myself. Nearly 750,000 Ohioans face student loan debt, and student loan debt has become the second highest debt in the country across the nation in U.S. households. As I go and I talk to our members, I know they experience these same concerns. Some of them have been paying back their debt 10, 20, 25 years since they graduated. And they're not only concerned about their financial stability, but how they're going to continue to afford to pay for their children's education. The cost of college is no longer just the price we pay for pursuing our professional goals. It determines what our professional goals can be. I know that I am personally just one car repair or one unknown bill away from wrecking my monthly budget, let alone if I were to become unemployed. And that's not just bad for me, that's bad for all of Ohio. And that's why I'm here today. We need a governor like Ed FitzGerald who understands that, not a governor who continues to cut taxes for the wealthiest Ohioans while also gutting education funding. And with that, I thank you, and I'll turn it over to former State Rep Larry Christman.
Well, I didn't expect that. Very gratuitous and thankful comments.
We'll find somebody else to be our Democrat.
Keep going.
At any rate, I am formerly honorable. And some of you graybeards I actually remember seeing around the State House. We'll just not say how old either of us are. I am so pleased to be here today to stand with Ed FitzGerald. I spent a career well over 40 years in education policy, legislative issues around education. We have always looked at the issues of how much people can save in advance, how much they have to pay while they're in school, and how they pay off that debt that's left. It's a nice little three-set bracket. Ed's plan speaks to all of that. What has been a traditional problem in higher education, focusing on how people can save, how they do that cash flow problem when they're in school, and how they deal with the loan debt. It's an important piece. As you listen to Ed, you know one thing he's doing. He's trying to inspire people to aspire to college. They're trying to inspire them to aspire to college so that they can improve themselves, improve their families, and improve their communities, and thus improve the state. This is an important step forward, critical. It'd be great if we had more money, but there are limitations. These are important, serious policy proposals that you have heard today. Thank you very much.
Question or two?
Ed,
Yeah.
can you tell us, would there be government matches to the money that goes into the savings account, and could it be spent on public and private?
Yes. What I'm talking about doing in terms of college savings accounts is basically the exact same thing that we've done in Cuyahoga County, which is we start the fund, we set it up. If somebody wants to opt out of it, they can opt out of it, but it's automatic, basically, enrollment in it, which is why we have, which is why it's going to be the largest pool of college savings accounts in the country, even though it's just one county. But it is 10% of the state. We put a deposit down of $100 just to get the account started. You are not allowed to take that money out except for an approved educational purpose. So I can just answer that question right now, because people say, well, what if the kid gets it when they're 5 or 6 years old and they want to take it out right away for something frivolous? Can't do it. So it has to be an approved expense. Now, we leave open whether or not we would make additional matches in the future, but we start with $100. And the other thing that's important about this is it's part of financial literacy education that the school districts can provide. Every single public school district, and there's dozens of them in my county, all signed on to work with this and help incorporate it with their curriculum. Just think about for a teacher, because we consulted with teachers before we implemented this program. Think about how much more powerful it is to be able to tell a child not just, well, here's the value of $1 and here's the way financial literacy works. Think about how much more powerful it is when every single child in the class can pull up their account online and say, this is how my account is gaining interest. So it's basically taking the same thing. We don't make a limitation on whether it's a public or private institution. We also don't say whether or not it's just for public school kids or private school kids. And we don't say whether it's just a poverty program. Because one of the problems with our educational loan programs have been they have an artificial cutoff of what they say should be the income level at which somebody gets help. And it just, a lot of people end up falling through the cracks. So we've made it completely universal. Just like K through 12 education is universal, we need to start looking at making higher education more universal, not just the profits of the wealthy.
Who can contribute to that Cuyahoga plan?
I'm sorry?
Who can contribute to the account?
Any parent and anyone that the parent gives permission to. So it can be the child themselves, it can be an uncle, it can be a grandparent, and we're going to be announcing some more things. What it allows you to do is also to incentivize certain behavior now. So for instance, there could be deals, and we're talking to some colleges right now about whether they would match the savings that is in the plans. But anyone that's approved by the child's guardian can make a deposit into the account.
How much would it cost? Where's that coming from?
Well, for that part of the program, it's actually very affordable. You know, we cover 10% of the state for $2 million. That includes all the deposits and all the administrative costs. So if you take that times 10, you're talking about something that in a $60 billion plus budget is extremely affordable. The biggest dollar item in our plan is just restoring that need-based financial aid, which we estimate would be about another $160 million or so. So you're talking about all of these initiatives are far less than the tax giveaways that have been given out to the wealthiest people in Ohio in the last few years.
Is that how they would pay for it? You would end those tax giveaways?
No, I didn't say I'd end it. What I said is that every single time that we get money that is above projections, you have to express that through what your priorities are. And my priorities, as I've always said, is to restore the local government fund first and foremost, and start to restore education funding that's been cut. The same thing, when I ran for county office, they said, how are you going to pay for it? We said, it's going to be a budgetary priority. We're going to make government more efficient, and I think we can fund it the same way at the state level. There's another question over here somewhere. No?
Ed, I got a question. In the last 10 days, the U.S. Senate failed to pass a student loan affordability. Ohio senators split on that. Portman was one of the 37 senators that voted against it. Sherrod Brown was one of the senators that voted for it.
Right.
Today we're talking about college affordability. What would you as governor do to actually knock down the absolute cost of college? Because otherwise we're going to be talking about affordability on an ever-increasing cost of college. How do we knock down the cost?
I would just say briefly that, you know, and it was Elizabeth Warren's bill that you're mentioning. I've been in support of that, and it would have been nice if we had state officials that had actually been advocating for that with our congressional delegation. Of course, John Kasich said absolutely nothing about it, just like he's really never addressed college affordability at all. Not at all. I mean, there really hasn't been any major initiative whatsoever. But look, there's no magic formula for it. If you want to make college more affordable, you've got to provide more funding for the institutions themselves. You have to provide more need-based financial aid, and you have to try to look at if there's ways that on a state level we could help to refinance or at least advocate for the authority or the flexibility to refinance some of that debt. And then you have to look at long-term savings plans. And I think you take that multi-pronged approach and you can get there. But the fact is that this isn't a mystery of why we're suffering from the problems we are in this state, because we're one of the worst states in the country now in terms of actually making investments in higher education, and the result is predictable.
So should college presidents do more to rein in the costs?
I think they can with administrative costs. I do. I mean, look, one of the things I've been a believer in, when I was mayor or as a county official, is trying to look at reducing the costs of bureaucracy. And do I think there's any unnecessary administrative costs or bureaucracy in higher education? Yes. And do I think some of the savings from that could be diverted to the student body and making it more affordable? I do.
All right, thank you guys.
Thanks, folks. Thanks for coming out.